lá no fundo, ó. Parece que é ouro mesmo. Será que é ouro? É isso aí. Vamos tentar o cigarro. Abraço. Chegamos aqui em Davidoff, República Dominicana. Coisa linda esse campo, hein? Vai del Cibao, Esperança.
Perdón, ese poner, pero la
But here, when the tobacco gets here, we have a plant that is more or less 45-day-old plant. Dame una, Alberto. So, this is what comes from the greenhouse. I'm going to show you some of the job. And we receive a plant that is more or less 45 days old, and you can see a very good root system. I'll explain that when we're in the greenhouse, how important this is. And we're going to be transplanting the plant here. It's a specific seed to this specific soil. This is Zone 7 Hikome, also my mother's farm. And we transplant a plant given to us by Davidoff. In this case, this is San Vicente Mejorado. San Vicente is a plant, it's a seed that came from Cuba in 1962. You're gonna see more of it throughout the tour. But this is a hybrid that we have created. And I'll explain hybrids in greenhouses. But in a short way of explaining it, our tobacco is ours alone. It doesn't have the ability to create offsprings. So nobody can steal our tobacco. So this is a hybrid created specifically for us, which is pretty cool. Davidoff has 70 farmers, right? More or less, under contract. And we control 15 different zones. So this farm, my mother's, is under contract to grow tobacco for Davidoff. So this is Davidoff's tobacco, right? They grow the tobacco for us in the greenhouses. They grow over 10 million plants every single year. It's a lot of tobacco. And they spread it to these different zones, these 15 zones, depending on the soil. San Vicente in particular has the ability to stimulate a lot in the acid area. It's really good for blending. Keeps your mouth nice and moist. In this particular farm, when we transplant, we use a very high-end measuring tool. You know, everything is very high-end in Davidoff. And in this case, this is 14 inches thick, 14 inches. And the reason why we have this distance between every plant is because if you put the plants too close to each other, then they compete for the same nutrients. If you put them too far away from each other, then you're just wasting space, right? So no money goes into our pockets. So what you have here is a nice example over the last 1, 2, 3, 4, there was 5 weeks of groups that have come before you. Interesting, the first line, those were the Chicago Cubs. So they actually flew in 4 helicopters about 5 weeks ago. So you can see how well they did. You can see that they planted their own plants, and there's some spaces where they failed, didn't do it properly. So I'm gonna give you guys the opportunity to pay for your breakfast. This was not free, and I'm gonna let you guys, if you guys want, to plant your own plant. I'm gonna let you guys plant 1 per person, and if you guys don't want to do it, it's not mandatory, but I think it would be a nice experience to get nice and muddy.
Just cough up $50 for the breakfast?
It might be worth. I mean, I think the labor just went up. You know,
I was gonna say you're not clearing the
I
labor.
did it last year.
But this is what basically what you want to do is make sure the ground is more or less up to here. No cover a single leaf. No te comienzo. So I'll be the first example. And you see these trenches, you don't want to do it in the bottom. We do here irrigation by flooding, inundation. And you can see the farm is in a nice incline. So it's all by gravity. We have pumps that pump the water all the way to the top, and it just comes down nicely. So you don't want to do it up here because then the roots don't have enough reach to grab the nutrients. You want to do it more or less halfway. More or less where you see the mud stopping.
Like the ridge,
Yeah, the ridge.
or the ridge drops.
So you're gonna take your stick and,
I'll get those. I got him. I got him.
Already there.
and that's how tobacco cigars get made. It's that easy. Look how fast. Actually, that's 5 years later, by the way. So this was all the stick, right? 14 inches, guys. 14 inches. Innuendos.
Yeah, I was.
So you basically plant it right there. It's that simple. Get my hands a little muddy, and make sure no bottom leaves are covered. If they're covered, then they can rot. You know.
The whole plant will rot?
Yeah, it can get a disease. When there's a lot of rain, like in the last couple months, you can get blue mold, you can get pata negra, black sham. So you don't want any leaves to be excessively moist, or any part of the plant to be excessively moist. So you can see how fast they'll grow. From 45 days, that's more or less a 5-week-old plant, the first row over there. The second row was an American group. Third row was a Canadian group. So you can see who does better job. And then this row was actually a school trip that we did. We were teaching kids about the industry of tobacco. So it was a really nice experience. We got all these kids to plant their own tobacco. So then you're gonna use your measuring tool and make sure it's 14 inches apart. And then again, right? So who's up for this?
I like to try.
Yeah, thank you.
Wat moest, je moet wel fotograferen.
Yeah, there's some golden up.
And we have 4 sticks. And try not to step in the middle, because that's exactly where you're not supposed
I'm
to step.
sorry.
Now she's got a permanent.
This one?
So where I made that hole, I already made the hole, I already measured. Who wants to come and plant more? Please.
Don't step in the
Here,
middle, right?
somebody hang on to this.
I mean, that's recommendation.
So, 14 inches from hers, correct?
Yeah, 14 inches from her. Somebody can start a row back here. There's more sticks over there. Alberto, tú me puedes pasar un palo.
Now I noticed you got blocks.
Yes. So the water is actually going to be going down these lanes, these vertical lanes. There you go. You can start there. And that's exactly where you're not supposed to start.
Goed, Moes, hij is weinig verkrijgen. Goed. Oh,
Thank God for that.
Yeah. Wat die gewoon
kom, gaat op je toilet, ik heb een tas.
Marina. Marina.
Hij gooi je het uit.
So the plant will grow from a seed to a plant about 2 kilos. That's 20 million times its original weight, more or less. So it has the ability to grow really quickly. You can see from week to week how fast it grows. And in regards to the nutrients, so Davidoff basically finances everything for us. We actually get 4 soil samples made in different parts of every single one of the farms. And with that soil sample, we know what is missing. You know, we gotta regulate the pH levels. It has to be between 5 and 8. And we add and we try to bring it to its original stage. We don't want to alter it. You know, every region is specific to its particular type of soil. We don't want to change it. Now, there are special cases. For example, the Yamasa farm, which is a wrapper farm that we have outside of the valley, that soil is originally 4.4 pH level, and tobacco doesn't grow underneath 5. So we have to bring up the pH level, and that's something that we alter of that soil. If the pH level is too low, then the tobacco just doesn't mature and doesn't grow. So that is an exception, because that's outside of the growing region of Dominican Republic. Normally we do soil samples. Davidoff finances all the fertilizers. Davidoff finances all the insecticides, anything that needs to be done in the farm. Infrastructure. They will finance that infrastructure to 4 or 5 years to any farmer, and it's a win-win relationship. So Davidoff gives you a healthy plant that is 45 days, gives you everything, gives you technical assistance. Alberto here, ¿cuántos años tiene trabajando con nosotros? 17 years with us. He has worked he's an agronomer, has worked in the greenhouses, has worked in the fermentation and the aging and everything else, and now he's one of the main agronomers of the company. And they come to every single farm almost every 2 days to give you technical assistance. And at the end, they sell that tobacco to Davidoff, and for a good price, depending on quality. And it's a win-win situation. We control everything, and we get the tobacco that we want, and they get a good harvest. You know?
Do you keep any tobacco for your own house plant?
Let's go.
All this tobacco is for Davidoff. All this tobacco is for Davidoff. So that's 45 days old. About the 60th day, I could write a book, and every single day it would be different. Every single crop would be different. Depends on weather. Just to give you an example, I was gonna start harvesting that tobacco more or less like 20 days ago, and I started, and then it started downpouring for 3 days, so I couldn't do it. You know, so it really depends on the weather. But more or less on the 60th day, you start harvest, and it takes more or less 30 days to harvest the whole plant. And that's where we're gonna go now to harvest some tobacco. Any questions?
And you continuously plant them. Every day you harvest them somehow.
So tobacco, do we continuously plant? Tobacco is a 1-year crop, once a year crop. So we start in Dominican Republic after hurricane season. Some countries do year round, right? But in Dominican Republic, it's only once a year. After hurricane season, you start preparing the fields September, October, and then you start November up into December, and then you start harvesting late January, sometimes up to early April. And that's more or less the range of tobacco in Dominican Republic. Every farm is different. The closer to Haiti you get, the more west you get, the sooner you start. It's drier. The more you go to the east, the more wet it is, so you start later. So everything depends on weather. So for example, that area, it's resting this year. So in this farm, we have the ability to crop rotate, or not crop rotate, rest the soil. And here you can see that we grow in stages. So that was the first stage. No, first stage was over there, you can't see it. Second stage was that one. This is the third stage. So we are basically
Third stage.
not putting all of our, all our eggs in one basket. We plant in different stages throughout the season, just in case there's a torrential downpour or something we cannot foresee. And that way we can spread out the yield. The yield more or less is even. For example, the first stage had a little bit of a disease problem, not too bad. But the second and third didn't get it because we planted after a rain. So that washed away the disease. So if we would have all planted together, the whole farm, then probably the whole farm would have gotten the disease.
So what happens if you go too long before harvesting the leaf? Instead of 60 days, you harvest it at 90 days, or something happens in between.
I'll talk about it when we harvest. Okay. The other thing you see is that here we have more or less 40 acres. We only plant 25 acres a year, and that way we're able to rest the soil. New soil is always the best, but you don't always have new soil. So you let it rest, and then with the soil sample you add the nutrients as necessary, right? So let's go to the harvest. ¿Dónde vamos a cosechar?
Is that? Is that? Is that?